Happy Saturday to you. I hope everybody's having a great Saturday and a great weekend so far. My name is Don Terrell, and I want to welcome you to another great episode of The Color of Motion, where I like to say, hey, stories come in all shades. And I highlight people of color in diverse backgrounds in the industry of motion graphics, animation, visual effects, cartoons, and comics. This space that I'm just, by now, ecstatically crazy about. Again, I want to welcome you to the show. You know the drill. Jump in, say hello, let me know where you're tuning in from so I can give you the big shout out that you so deserve. Make sure, like I said, that you get connected with our group over on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/The Color of Motion. Come join us. We're having a lot of fun over there, having some engaging conversations, sharing industry news. I definitely want you to be a part of the Color of Motion family because it's growing. And hey, who doesn't love a new addition to the family? So I definitely want to see you in the community. Before we get going, I definitely want to make sure I thank our sponsor for this week's episode, Toon Boom. Toon Boom Animations. Hey, they bring your stories to life. If you're a 2D animator, artist, you're going to love Toon Boom. Toon Boom is the industry standard for all the big studios that are creating such amazing 2D animations. And I want to thank Toon Boom for getting behind the show and really helping to support it. Like I said, we just had a amazing, fun giveaway a few weeks ago of a couple of their software packages. Looking forward to doing some more great giveaways with them as for sure. But want to thank them for being a great sponsor for the show. Toon Boom Animations. What else? Man, we got a lot of big things happening with the show. Like I said, this year is season 2 is rolling along, and like I said, can't be more happy about it, everything that's going on. Now you are able to check out the show on the website. So hop on over to thecolorofmotion.net. Check out the site. You'll be able to check out all the guests, some information, resources we're putting up. But you're also able to check out the show live there as well. Like I said, we come to you every Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, live on LinkedIn, YouTube, the Facebook groups and pages. Hey, like I said, I definitely want you to get connected with me. I want to hear from you. You can find me here on all these social channels right here. Reach out to me. Let me know what you think of the show, anything I might try differently. Like I said, I'm constantly thinking about how I can level up the show. There's going to be some kind of slight changes in season 3, so definitely want to hear from you as well. I do always kind of highly encourage people to hop on over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so that you are notified of when great new content goes up. Comment, give a thumbs up to the episodes because it definitely helps the channel grow. And there you can check out all the great guests that we've had on so far. So hop on over there for sure. Become a part of the Color of Motion family. So definitely appreciate it. Mr. Michael, I appreciate you tuning in. Michael Burton, longtime supporter of the show. So definitely appreciate you stopping by. Again, make sure you hop into the comments, say hello. It definitely helps encourage me and it helps encourage the guests as well. So definitely appreciate you, Miss Maggie from Baton Rouge. I appreciate you stopping by, Maggie. I know you've been talking about me. I haven't called. I'm sorry. But look to hear from you real soon. Hear from me real soon for sure. But I appreciate you stopping by the show, Mr. Michael. Yep. Hey, bro. Appreciate you. Appreciate you for sure. What else? Man, definitely want to make sure that I get everything kind of in, the housekeeping before we get this great episode kicked off. I've been looking forward to it for a while now, and we're going to have a fun conversation. You get two for the price of one today. Another two. Two guests today. I've been looking forward to having them on ever since I connected with them and hadn't met them in person, but that'll be happening soon. But been looking forward to having them on when we talked about their project that they're working on, and just knew that had to have them on the show and kind of dive into their project, which you're going to see an animatic of it. They have just finished a Kickstarter campaign and got the production underway, and now they're going into a GoFundMe, which I will share all of that information as the show goes on. Information where you can help support what they're doing for sure, because it's definitely something that's important and something that's needed as well. Without, I think, any... Oh, yeah, no. I definitely don't want to, pass this up as well. Like I said, we are always looking, like I said, to get, working to get sponsors and everything. But you are able to help support the channel and the show as well. Hey, like I said, I love a great cup of coffee. Buy me a cup of coffee at Don Terrell /Don Terrell. You donate anything you want. It definitely helps me to continue to level up the channel, continue to produce great content. So with that, I'm not going to delay any longer because you know how quickly these shows go by, for sure. So without any further ado, my next guest is an oral historian, documentarian, scriptwriter, and playwright whose writing is not confined by genre, letting her stories decide how they want to be told. She records personal accounts from her subjects and weaves their statements into poignant reflections of their lives. Through her documentary, A Place to Become, Montclair Through the Eyes of the Glenridge YWCA, participants were able to recount their decades-old experiences at the YWCA that served as a haven for racism for them. The production was chosen for the State of New Jersey Department of Education, New Jersey Amistad Commission Curriculum, and is in permanent collections at the Montclair History Center. Her teleplay, Mel and Missy, won at the 2013 Urban World Film Festival, and her play, Can We Dance, had performances at the National Black Film Festival in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The play also showed in New York City and Portland, Oregon. Her other documentaries have screened at Columbia University, the San Diego Black Film Festival, and the DC Independent Film Festival. She's a Black Public Media 360 Incubator Plus Pitch Black Program Fellow and a Jacob Burns Film Center Creative Culture Resident. That was a mouthful. With The Ride. She divides her time between writing and producing and running her nonprofit. Navigates the maze to achievement, which prepares Black and Latino students for specialized and selective high school admissions. My other next guest is a multidisciplinary artist, designer, and filmmaker. J. Bird Lathon has created logos, original typefaces, sportswear, motion graphics, animated sequence, and books. He is interested in a cinema of artists, outcasts, eccentrics, and icon classes. I hope I said that right. That aesthetically irreverent, innovative, and informative. His shorts number from a Montgomery jail, 2007, screened at the Nashville Film Festival in the process, and Mrs. Right Now, 2000, at the Black International Film Festival of Berlin. His latest short, Impaled and Inhaled, 2020, uses his photographs and poetry to tell his story of the September 11th attack on New York in observance of his 20th anniversary. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years or longer. His feature screenplays have received recognition in 2020. The coming of age wrapped in a murder mystery, A Little Victory, was a quarterfinalist and second rounder in the ScreenCap drama and film fund competitions. The drama administrative leave was an official selection for the Loudon Film Festival Screenplay Competition. In 2019, his short psychological thriller Presser was a semifinalist in the inaugural the Pan African Film Festival Embrace LA John Singleton Short Film Competition. He is a creative Capital Nashville 2012 cohort and Sundance co-ab for producing cohort advised by Karen Chien. He is a Black Public Media 360 Incubator Plus Pitch Black Program Fellow and Jacob Burns Film Center Creative Cultural Residence, still a mouthful, and with collaborator Allison Shillingford with The Ride. Everybody, please help me welcome my very special guests and friends, Miss Allison Shillingford and J. Bird Lathon.
Hey, Doc.
I think I need some oxygen after that. I need some oxygen after all of that. But that just goes to show you all the accolades that you two have accumulated over your time for sure. Mr. DeMille, I appreciate you, my brother. Happy Saturday to you too. Yes, we are going to have a great show today. So make sure that everybody sticks around. Say something too. Okay, we are going to get kicked off. Man. All right. I've been waiting for this for a while, like I said, ever since we met and connected a while ago. And like I said, I just was fascinated by the project that you were doing. Again, we're going to be showing their pitch animatic that they put together during their Kickstarter, and now getting ready to move into a GoFundMe for the production and everything. So, Ms. Allison, we're going to start off with you. What got you interested in oral history storytelling originally?
You know, our elders are just full of treasures. They have so, and then their stories are amazing. And I really love talking to people much older than me to hear, I can sit for hours. And I've been thankful to be able to do that with oral history, and then bring those stories to life. Um, the first project I did is where the story came from, when I interviewed people in their 80s or older about having a first Black president, and they're like Black people. And from that, it was just their comments on that, but also this amazing history lesson about whether they grew up in the South or the North, and just stuff you don't learn in history books.
Yeah.
So that's exactly.
Yeah.
And while they're here, we need to tap into those stories.
Yes, definitely. Like I said, it's such a wealth, like you just said, of knowledge and treasure and stories. And I'm basically, even though my family's from the South, Alabama, I grew up in the North. And so, like I said, when I know it's interesting the impact, like I said, of the North, between the North and the South. And like I said, it really didn't click with me until, me and my family went down for a family reunion. And my mother, I drove down with me and my sister, and we got into Aniston, which has some serious racial history, I learned. But we got in like really early in the morning, like 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was like,
Hmm.
really pitch
Hmm.
black. And my mom just couldn't rest. She was sitting up the whole time. Don't go down this street. Don't go down that street. And I'm like, didn't really hit me until, like hearing it from my mom, just everything that went on and just what she had to deal with, um, you know, as a history down in the South, for sure. Mr. Latham, Jay Bird, what kind of got you kicked off in graphics and animation and design for you?
Well, I really got into film and animation kind of after I developed this love of music. Right. Like I had a great piano teacher in my hometown, Clarice White, who really got me into music and about how to listen to it and deconstruct it. But the interesting thing about that is while I was listening to music, I was always picturing them in my head in some kind of way. Like it was a movie or a TV show or something. I was writing it in my head to the music I was listening to. So when I discovered like things like Looney Tunes and German silent films on public television and Russian silent films on public television, or the people I knew in my hometown that had access to foreign films because they were GIs that lived abroad or came back abroad with them, and I could see them for the first time on a small screen. I was really enthralled with it, and I was like, wow, what could I do kind of similar to that? And so the answer was seeing my first episodes of Gigantor and reruns, Astro Boy, known
Oh,
as Tetsuo, Star Blazers, and then Speed Racer, which I would, rush home off the bus,
yeah, me too. Speed Racer and Astro Boy.
yeah, man. And, I'd be doing that same pose just in time to make it to the couch, that, because once you start hearing that intro to Speed Racer, man,
Oh
it gets you
man,
all,
go, go,
you know what I
go,
mean?
go, Speed Racer.
Yeah, so I'd make sure because here's the thing, I actually started doing my homework in school, so I'd have more time to watch, all at the time what they called Japanimation back then.
Yeah.
Someone have to, stop that to do pesky homework, so it's basically that and Looney Tunes. In fact, I was at a bar here in Nashville, with some friends of mine, and you get that question, how do you, get in the film, or how do you learn how to tell stories? And again, it's like it all started with, and at the time I didn't know it, but it was like Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes, like I think was one of those, and I'm sure Allison would agree with me on is that for a while there they were kind of like the arbiters of culture for the United States, whatever your color was. I mean, because they had these great operatic songs or colloquial songs from local areas of the country that they would interpret it through cartoons like Mama Likes Shortbread or Cornbread or something like that, or it was like this Wagnerian interpretation. Well, I guess it was a Wagnerian interpretation of Wagner, like Kill the Wabbit,
Yeah.
so it was like that and jokes that they would put into their stories that I really kind of like latched onto. And plus, the music for Looney Tunes was bananas. Those two composers, Carl Stallings, and I think the other one's name was Milt Franklin or something like that. I can't remember, but they were really, really amazing at putting all these different snippets of different types of music and then timing cues together. Where again, thanks to my music teacher, I'm like watching this going like, damn, this is bananas. It's like everything is like syncopated so well. And then some of them had a message, even though if they were just like funny things or just like cultural things. So I remember, there was one called Piker's Peak that I really enjoyed, but then another one called Little Boy Boo that had Foghorn Leghorn. And see, and I know Allison and you will appreciate this because, again, when I'm seeing this was like mid to late 70s, early 80s, where racial tensions were still high in the South. I mean, because my town didn't really fully integrate, I think, until 1970, when they built a high school that my dad ended up, coaching and teaching at. So anyway, so watching this one called Little Boy Boo, and you see Foghorn Leghorn, who for us was kind of like a character of all the, Southern people that, were either trying to oppress us or bring pain to us, but, it was okay to laugh at this guy. It was a way of dealing with the tension of that. So seeing like him be bested by Egghead Jr., which is a whole nother metaphor of intellectualism and like this learned education, as they would say, Foghorn would say. So they were like, fighting it out with each other, playing hide and go seek. And Foghorn goes and hides in what they call a lean-to, toolbox. So, and I'm sure you've seen these before. They're built next to a house, and he opens the lid and he hops in. Egghead Jr. Pulls out a piece of paper, does an equation, draws an X on the ground, pulls, Foghorn out of the ground butt first. And Foghorn just can't believe it. And he says, "One side, boy." And he's about to go over the feed box and open it, right? And he goes, "I better not look. I might just be in there." Okay.
Yeah.
Now look how deep this is. Now you got the intellectual aspect of it. They're fighting each other, and that besting each other that way. And then he says, "I'm not going to look. I just might be in there." So I'm talking to my two friends at the bar, and I said, "You know what?" And I said, that was the moment it hit me. He said, "I'm interested in the chickens who ain't afraid to look."
Awesome. I mean, and for you, go ahead.
No, that was it. That was it.
Okay. For you, Allison, I mean, did you start out, I mean, kind of writing, your love of writing, or did you go to school to kind of, get your writing skills and chops that way?
It's funny. She's Gotta Have It is what made me want to be a filmmaker.
Oh, yeah.
And I only applied to one school, which was NYU Early Decision. And I remember my dad said, "You need to apply." I'm from North Carolina, so he was like, "You might want to look at some other schools." I said, "No, I'm going to go to NYU. I'm going to go to NYU Film School." And I got there and I graduated. But interesting enough, my first semester after film, I was like, I think I want to go into the dramatic writing program. So I transferred into dramatic writing program and graduated from there. But it was that movie that made me that inspired me to like, I was writing, but it was that movie that inspired me that wanted to use film as the medium to tell those stories, tell stories.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Now, like I said, we're gonna dive, deep into your project, The Ride. But for you, Allison, what was kind of, the genesis of, hey, this, I think this could be a really good story, and I think this would really work well using animation to do it.
So it was one of the stories from the documentary, and I said it was just one of the stories that just really sat with me, and I said I really want to make this animation. I didn't know why. I just knew I wanted to make an animation, and I could see it in my head, but I didn't know how to articulate what I saw in my head. And so Jay Bird and I have a mutual friend, Doris, who's one of our animators, lead animators on the movie, and she said, "I'm going to introduce you to Jay Bird." So I sent him the oral history. I had it on tape, and I sent him the script of the oral history because I moved the story around a little bit the way she told it. And he came back with these images, and I was like, "Oh my God, you're in my head. Yes, this is exactly what I want." And I was like, "We're partners for life, dude." That's how that came about. I don't know why. I just knew I wanted it as animation, and it just all fell into place. And
Yeah.
literally every image that he came up with, I was like, "Yes, yes, yes!" Like, yeah.
Yeah. I think now we're starting to see the power of how animation can really, one, not only tell stories but educate. Um, I always kind of date myself here, but I don't know if you. I'm sure you do, Jay Bird. I love Schoolhouse Rock,
Yes.
Yeah.
and
Yes.
and that
Yeah.
really clicked for me how powerful animation can be in really educating you on something, and it really sticks with you. Like I said, and don't tie it with a great jingle, or a great song. It sticks with you. I think everybody knows I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. All
Yep.
those, great ones, conjunction, junction, what's your function,
Mhm.
that type of thing, just really I think really drives it home the point that animation is really a powerful medium on really telling stories and really educating.
And there's
Yeah.
no limitation with animation. You can do whatever you want with
Right.
animation.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. I love it. So, what for you was kind of the first step, Jay Bird, in translating Allison's story visually, um, you know, as you've seen it as she imagined it in her head, and you putting the visual to it. That's always, I think a lot of people kind of don't get. It's a collaborative type thing, and animators going to bring kind of their perspective, and Allison's got the writers got their perspective, and just meshing it.
Right. Well, it's really funny. Allison didn't find this out till last year. We got a chance to work together in the same space thanks to the Jacob Burns, foundation, which was like, four of the greatest weeks of my life to be able to, go back to New York and work on a project and just totally be focused on it. But, once she gave me a copy of the transcript, which is something I always ask for, like when I'm doing projects like this, is an editable copy. And so I listened to the recording. And first of all, Dr. Adelaide's voice is just so amazing. So it's just like when you hear it, you're already calmed and uplifted by that already, because you can hear the years of resilience in the tone of her voice when she speaks. And plus she speaks in this way that's so eloquent and unpretentious. I mean, you just can't help but fall in love with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was like listening to it, and I stopped it for a second, and I said, okay, because I was starting to get a lot of different images in my head at once. So, and I listened to the rest of it, and I said, okay, I told myself that I was in, and then I told Allison, I was like, yeah, I'm in. And I think we had a phone conversation. I hung up the phone, and I said to myself, "Am I good enough to do this?" I didn't tell her that till last year. I'm sure you like, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I'll do it. It's like, okay, now how am I going to do this?
How am I gonna do this? How am I gonna
You know what I mean?
do this? And
Because for a while in the '90s, I was like doing like lots of different types of work, to keep from going broke in New York. So I was doing a lot of graphic design. Actually, I started doing graphic design my sophomore year in college or freshman year in college. I was doing campaign posters for students who wanted to run for office, government office, and as far as that concerned, and I had a pretty good record at it.
yeah,
So like painting T-shirts and doing jeans and that kind of thing. That's what I was doing to kind of stay afloat. So now, this is like the early 2000s when we started talking about this project. I think it was that. Maybe I'm dating myself here, but I'm listening to it and telling her the same thing. I was like, yeah, I want to do this, and I sent her back an illustrated, annotated version of the transcript that had like sketches in the margins. And that was kind of like, because to me, I was just like, sometimes your first impression or the first image you get is the best, or usually the best ones. And so the things that I was thinking that were indelible to me, I was thinking, well, these are probably universal to other people, not only just Black people, but just the what she was talking about as themes in the South. Because I was really interested in telling Southern stories anyway. And at that time, I was kind of working on a 3D animated interpretation of what I thought like the dialogue between like the Scopes Monkey trial and like the creation and evolution debate, and that's what our animation producer and I were working on when she introduced me to Allison. And so I was thinking along the lines, I was like, okay, I got to deal with some of these similar themes I'm dealing with this project, but I can deal with it even better with this one, because not because it was more didactic. It was like she was so eloquent, which means I could be more abstract and more metaphorical with it.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Because sometimes like words can be like a how can I put it, a restriction to some, but for me it was so I don't know, emancipating, for lack of a better word, that she was talking about was so beautiful in the way she did it, the way she related it to us. I was just like, oh wow. I'm like, everything she's talking about can be an image.
Yeah.
And then the assemblages of those images in one frame itself could be an allegory. Because I'm a big fan of allegory, metaphor, symbolism, the different ways you can kind of subtly do that, context, subtext, pretext, not only just from literature, but also just from music and architecture, which, I had a background into as well. But So I sent her back all the sketches, and she, again, like she said, she loved them, which I was like,
That's always
oh,
the
they
thing. Oh
do.
wow,
I was like,
they
I
really
was like,
like
she
them.
don't think imagination like I do. I was like, oh, okay, I found, again, like we said, you know, soul brothers and sisters for life. See, I didn't grow up with any sisters. I grew up in a household with 3 other brothers. So, and I was child, so I always wanted a sister like Allison, but
Awesome,
trying to do
awesome.
this out there. You know what I'm saying? So, like many of my really smart, friends who are women who, they've like become like my muses, for my art,
Yeah,
my life, my creative, endeavors and stuff, and have really been integral in kind of like, you know, pushing me along this circuitous but fortuitous path,
yeah,
as an artist, which can be very frustrating on a lot of different levels,
yeah,
not even just for the obvious ones.
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? It's not only do you have like the whole issue with dealing with the business being a person of color, but it's also dealing with finding somebody who has a similar sensibility.
yeah.
That's the other,
That's always the hardest part. Yeah,
right, man. I agree. So
yeah.
finding Allison when she found me, I was just like, yeah, man, this is it. We're gonna put
Yeah,
this thing in fifth gear. We're gonna roll with it. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So,
Awesome,
you know,
awesome. Uh, Mr. or Mrs. Facebook user, I am not monitoring on Facebook, so I don't see your name, which is a great segue into this. Um, Please make sure that you give ECAM permission to pull your information. That way I can call you out by name. I can see you and everything, and your avatar will come up. But I appreciate you, Facebook user, for stopping by and tuning in. My man, oops, let me turn this off. My man, Mr. Wayne Carnegie, another super talented animator, great guy. Had him on
yeah,
season one. Mr. Wayne Carnegie. And actually, I'm going to give you a little plug, Anthony. His animation, one of he worked on, uh, just released on Netflix. The please, Wayne, help me with it because it just quickly like that slipped my mind. But he worked on that project that, like I said, just released in Netflix. So I'm gonna try and watch it later on today. Um, but for you, Allison, were you like I said, it's kind of easy telling, oral history in like a written short form. Were you kind of worried in a sense because if we're going to check out, like I said, the animatic in a little bit here, it was kind of heavy. Like I said, you're talking about some really, heavy subjects of racism in the South, and like I said, going over lynchings and bodies, of that. Were you kind of, in a sense, a little worried on how it would translate into animation, or you just, like you said, immediately knew that this should be done in animation?
Well, back then I just knew it had to be done in animation. But as time goes by, I've learned that maybe animation kind of softens the blow a little bit so that you could actually witness and hear the story. I don't know if I could see that reenacted. I wouldn't
Mm,
want to see what we show
right.
reenacted. So
yeah,
I think the
it was
animation
it
gives
was
us
tough
that.
watching Roots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I loved it, but it was tough
yeah.
watching it.
It was hard. It was hard. Um, but yeah, I think animation kind of softens the blow without disrespecting or taking away from it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to your point is, um, which, like I said, Jay kind of loosely alluded to, is it's a very freeing medium where you're not limited to certain things. It's just your imagination and how you can kind of merge the two together. I think, like I said, animation is really good at that. Just allowing you to just explore worlds and situations in a much better way for sure. Um, Jaybird, like I said, as an artist, like you were just talking, it's always kind of that little angst of whether the person that you're doing the work for really likes the work and gets the work.
right.
Um, but for you, um, how has it been, just experience wise, and how it's impacted you just working on the project?
Well, whew, that's a pretty. Hmm. Well, it's like when when I grew up in the South, in the time I did here in Tennessee, because Tennessee's got a really interesting legacy of, you know, a lot of historical aspects with racism and also anti-intellectualism,
Yeah,
which is something that really kind of like always intrigued me. And plus, there's the whole aspect of the Native American history here too, as well, which is not discussed enough. I still think.
yeah,
But anyway, it's just like again, I've had that conversation, you know, that Allison talks about that mothers have to have with kids, for
yeah,
black
yeah,
kids, because of being a threat, for just showing up and just simply existing for some people. And growing, and I said this in our Kickstarter video. I mean, it's like growing up in the shadow of Emmett Till. I mean, we had like certain ways of functioning as teens, preteens actually. I remember the year I went to see Star Wars in '77. I mean, that was that was still a pretty tense year,
yeah,
in in this state and in this town. So I mean, you know, there was just modes of survival you had to kind of like partake in. So, as the Indians would say, so you can live to fight another day. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
So working on this project, it really made me realize how much I appreciated, those that came before me who, kind of paved that way.
yeah,
But it also fed into like another aspect of my, purpose as an artist, which is to also bring light and like appreciation to those who have, been in the struggle or have been allies to the struggle that are not the quote unquote usual suspects you hear about in history.
yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the whole thing about with numbers from Montgomery Jail. It featured images of King and Dr. King Jr. and Rosa Parks, but it was really sparked by the fact that at the time my grandnieces and nephews weren't learning stories or history about other people in the civil rights movement other than those 4 or 5 that we talk about.
yeah,
And I was like, there's so many people who
yeah,
have names and names who are in images of civil rights that were so important to this story that they're not learning about. So I was like, okay, so this is what these short films are going to be about. And it's been a cycle of films I've been working on for quite some time. And I think now, after the ride is done, I'll have the time, to kind of finish that. And that's kind of going to be part of my legacy of that aspect of the struggle that really, imparted a lot to me, was like having this relationship with images of people doing it, because the kids say it kind of loosely now. If there's no pictures, there's no evidence. But there was plenty of evidence back then.
yeah, yeah,
And great photographs by people like Gordon Parks, who's a huge influence.
yeah,
He was somebody who wanted me to make films before that second wave, I should say third wave of black filmmakers, because I kind of consider Michaud and them kind of the first wave.
yeah,
And then Parks, Ivan Dixon, Melvin Van Peebles, whose film Story 3 Day Pass is one of my all-time favorite films.
yeah, yeah,
And then spiking them, Robert Townsend, John Sayles is another one
yeah,
who I think has made some great films with people of color in them.
yeah,
Um, so that kind of stuff is like, it informs this work too, but secondarily so in some ways, because again, the visual arts I was consuming before that, and then the music I was listening to, like the protest. Like, here's something that Allison and I endorse, really kind of saw eye to eye on when we first started talking about this project, how this could be like a animated equivalent of like those great protest songs of the 60s, like Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn. I don't know if I can say that or you can beat that out.
no, you're good.
With songs like that, and like, Coltrane's, I think it's called Montgomery or Alabama. I can't remember which one of those two.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
I get my Coltrane tracks mixed up,
yeah,
But songs like that, and of course, What's Going On,
yeah. Oh yeah,
that whole
yeah,
concept
yeah.
album,
I
you
can't
know,
think of who did that, but who sang this song? But Strange Fruit.
oh yeah, of course, that's Billie Holiday.
Billie
Billie Holiday,
Holiday. Like I said,
yeah,
I could visualize that as a
right,
really powerful animated short that
yeah,
really hits
yeah.
home the point.
That was one, and then Doris brought one to me that I'd never seen before, and I don't know how it got past me because it was a jazz piece called "Bid 'Em In," which was about, it's a spoken word piece about, an actual slave auction. And "Bid 'Em In" is really powerful, and again, I love improvised dialogue. Like, there's this great film called The Hole, which won Academy Award, I want to say in 1960. It's about the Hubleys. It's one of the greatest films made of all time.
Yeah.
And when you see it, you'll understand why it won an Academy Award. Not that's what we needed to validate it,
Yeah.
but it uses this really great improvised dialogue by Dizzy Gillespie and another actor whose name escapes me at the moment because I'm 50 something. These memory drives ain't working as well as they used to be. But it's such a great, you know what I mean? And when you see it, and then you see the ending of it, you just sit back in your chair. You're just like, I can't think of anything else that could have gone to this film because it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, and again, that's where I draw a lot of my influence from structurally and like sometimes narratively too for cinema. It's like all the things that came before it because again, depending on what aspect of cinema you're working in, cinema can be very experimental or can be the most risk adverse conservative, discipline that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure. For sure.
And it's not as courageous as like somebody going on stage and pouring out their heart and being emotionally naked on a stage because you got all these takes you redo. But to make up for that, using something like animation where you can literally do whatever you imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no limit. And see, that's what I like. I like to work within self generated aesthetic constraints, but not ones created by the genres or the business of those genres themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I love it and just love just creating an art as a whole. Like I said, it's whatever is in your mind that you can
Right.
put down on paper or animation cell or music. That's why I love creatives. Anybody that could take something that's in their head and express it physically and tangibly is, I'm always impressed with for sure. And for you, Allison, who were who were some of the oral historians and writers and people that you really, resonated with and really loved?
Yeah. You know what? I did not learn about oral history until I was an adult. So it wasn't like there were oral historians that that I knew about that, but I've heard oral histories. I've heard, interviews of people, talking. I love listening to personal stories, where the interviewer is given the person the safe space to just share what they want to share. Sometimes, interviews are not the easiest thing to do sometimes because you have to build that level of trust.
Yeah.
And I don't know the interviewers' names to say, but I just love when I can hear stories, you know, whether it's a audio story or a video story, and someone just really taking the time creating a safe space where a person could just tell their stories. And I just love it when they're older people,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they have so many stories to tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, everybody that's just jumping in, we're having a fun and really informative conversation with my friends here, Allison Shillingford and J. Bird Lathon, um, creators and animator of short The Bird. Why do I keep saying The Bird? The Ride. And like I said, we're going to take a look at it in a minute. Um, and I'm going to ask both of you this question. What's to this point has been kind of the best piece of advice that you've been given that's kind of stuck with you and served you kind of well?
Don't give up. It all happens in time. It may not happen when you want it to happen, but you just don't. If you feel passionate about something, don't give up on it. And I think we've had to hold our passion for this project for quite a while, and it's getting closer to happening.
What about you, Jay Bird?
Well, it wasn't given me directly. It was actually I heard this again, and this is why it's great to hear listen to people tell stories. But it was some advice given from Lloyd Richards to August Wilson, where August Wilson, the great August Wilson, who also had like doubts about how his characters sounded and how sincere and authentic they said it. Well, they were having this conversation. He's like, Lloyd, I have this problem. It's like, it's like I have a problem, having my characters talk. And he says, well, don't. He said, you should listen to them.
Yeah, great piece
Aha!
of advice.
Here's my
Great,
spoon.
great piece of advice for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we all know, like I said, it's difficult and it's a long road seeing a project to fruition. What's been the biggest struggle so far in getting this project off the ground?
I would always say finances. I was naive when I first wanted to do this. I was like, oh, animation. I had never produced an animation before. I didn't know how expensive it would cost to make an animation. I was like, no, I want to make an animation. I want this to be not. I want this to be an animation. So that's all I was holding on to.
Yeah.
I would say that it is less expensive now
Yeah.
than it was when we first started this. Thank goodness,
Right.
Yeah.
technology. But I would say that finances. I mean,
Finances.
just because you want to pay people what they're worth. This is it's not like you have a camera and you're going to run and do some interviews and you just give some people a couple of dollars and some pizza because it's not like they're
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need someone to draw over it. Like animation is
Yeah. Even on the
different.
computer, it's a lot of work.
It's different than just going to go do some interviews and then find some B-roll from someplace and put it. Yeah, it's different. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say finances was the hardest. And some
Uh,
is we'll still have quite a bit to raise, but I would say, but we're going to get it done.
Yeah.
But I would say that would be the hardest. That was the hardest
Yeah. Yeah.
thing for
What
me.
What about for you, Jay Bird?
well, it's, gosh, man. Hmm. I want to say it's probably a tie between time and finding like-minded people to work with. I think that's it's like one thing that I did not acquire very early on in life was the talent of being able to pick the right people to work with.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that can, there was a saying that I picked up on when I lived in New York, and I want to say it originated among Jewish businessmen in the Lower East Side in the early 1900s, that the people you're doing business with is sometimes more important than the business you're doing with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was it took me a long time to learn that lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
maybe up to
that.
2 years, maybe up to just 2 years ago, but still,
But
you
it
know what I
is
mean?
such a crucial element having the
Yeah,
right people to work with on a project,
right.
and especially a project that spans a long time,
That's
like
true.
animation
That's true.
does.
Yep.
Which is why I've heard, like I said, a lot of studios, you know, yeah, they want to see you talented, but the most important thing is, do you get along in the company culture? Do you fit along with all the people that you're working with, and get along with them?
That right
Is the
there.
most important thing for them because they understand it's being together, working on a project for 2 3 years, maybe even longer on some projects, depending on the production of it. You know, they're like family for the most part. Because you spend a lot of time with them. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, tenacity is very important, and that's something that can't be taught. It's
Yeah.
got to be acquired.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like both of my parents were teachers, and my dad was a football coach, like in high school, and I played for him for 3 out of 4 years. It was like living. You ever see that movie, The Great Santini? It was like a
Yeah.
black man.
Yeah.
It was tough, man. In fact, I saw a fella earlier today play for one of his best teams, a school called Burt High School. And he said, "Man, your dad used to get after me every day." And I said, "That's why you still here." And he said, "Yep." Take it back today. That's what he said. And again, I love hearing brothers tell old stories like that. I mean, quite honest with you, I was kind of like a little, not resentful, but I was a little jealous sometimes because it's like, man, he spent so much time with all of these kids. But I understand what he was doing though.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was getting them ready for a path in life that some people didn't have the courage or the tenacity to do that for them as their parent, brother, whatever. So I kind of like see them as all like as my surrogate brothers now, because when I see them now, they're like, "Oh, you're the little boy that was in the locker room." It's like, "Yep, that was me." You know, you and I
And
love him for it because I hear all these stories that I didn't know about him that he
yeah.
did because he was that kind of humble dude where he didn't talk about that kind of stuff to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Never.
that's the
He was
beauty of,
like,
like you said, Allison, just the the breath of living that some people experience is just you live. And it's funny because I had just come across a post from Kelvin Shani. I think I, I don't want to get this wrong, but he's from over in Africa, but I don't want to say Lagos or Nigeria. It might be Nigeria, but he just posted a picture of his grandmother who turned 119.
yeah, I saw that.
And
Mhm.
my thought was, wow, the experiences that she lived, the span of time that she's lived, the things that she's seen and experienced, it's just, you can't. think of it. And even my own aunt lived to she was like 100. So it's such an interesting thing, and until you sit down and listen to them tell all the stuff that they go through and have gone through, over that great span of time, it's just mind-boggling. You know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you kind of alluded to it, and I like to say now is such a great time that we live in for creators because there is so many tools out there now that
Yep.
can help you get your creative idea out there. Um, Jaybird, for you, what are some of the things tools wise um, that you're kind of using and stuff? Like I said, you know, for people such as yourselves that are kind of not these big studios that have the millions of dollars to throw behind the project and stuff like that, um, but with the advent of software like Blender that's free, and DaVinci if you're into editing and all the other stuff, it really does kind of level the playing field for creatives getting their ideas and stories out there.
Well, it's so funny, man. It's like I'm so glad I'm having these conversations because I love the shop talk aspect of this too. And you're right. I mean, when we first tried to do this, it was some of it I felt was probably going to be cost prohibitive, and that's something that always really kind of like frustrated me. Of like, it's like I didn't want my imagination to be limited by fiduciary stuff.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
It was like I'm so tired of like being too broke to get the stuff that I need to do what I got to do.
Or just the technology at hand, because
Right, exactly.
George Lucas went through the same thing when he was putting Star Wars together. There were a lot of things he
Right,
wanted to do that the technology just he was just too far ahead of the technology.
right, exactly. And see, and that's one of the cats who made me really. It's like when I was already into science fiction anyway by watching German silent films like Metropolis and M, and then watching these obscure Russian films that had these crazy fantasy aspects of it. And then Doug Trumbull's work for 2001, that's another one of those kind of things. It's like I wanted my work to at least, if it didn't look like that stylistically, I wanted it to have that similar production value. And a lot of that stuff was just done in people's garages. But
Yeah,
still, I mean, look at it. And it's lasted for 50 years, man.
yeah,
So for me, I was so glad that software, even just the pre-visualization aspect of it, became more accessible, more supple, and more, I don't know, how can I put it, and less bite heavy. You know what I mean? Because that was the other thing. Like some of these things, man, like when you try to rent them back in the day, man, you like, you
Yeah.
put it on rent, and you come back 3 days later, and you just only
yeah,
15.
yeah. If your machine hadn't blown up or something
Right,
like
exactly.
that.
Power going out, you got to like, conjure the stars and all this kind of stuff to get to work again. And I was just like, damn, man. I'm like, see, I understand why certain people got frustrated with their artistic development when certain technology was there. Like, I was a huge fan of Leonardo da Vinci
Yeah,
and drawing a through line between the work of him and like Benjamin Banneker and Kraftwerk.
yeah, yeah,
and then Jamaican sound systems where, okay, if it didn't exist, they just built it.
yeah, yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? Da Vinci made his tools, Banneker did the same
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Kraftwerk made their computers and some of
yeah,
their synthesizers. Jamaican dub systems did the same thing. They made those
yeah,
huge walls of, and bruh, I mean, to me, that was not a strange thing to make those correlations between the four of them.
yeah,
Now, as I'm older, I'm running some problems with that going to
yeah,
college. But
yeah,
to get back to the tool question, stuff like After Effects, you know, and just being an Adobe guy where I can create something in like 4 or 5 different apps and then
yeah,
bring them into Premiere Pro and edit them,
yeah,
and then work it over to After Effects and do some other, animation to it, bring it back to Premiere Pro, go into Illustrator,
yeah,
update
yeah,
the file, go to Photoshop, do the same thing, and then make a PDF and send it to Allison.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know how long that would have taken in 20, 15 years ago? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, cause see, because I like a stick and move like like a musician does, and so a lot of my practice is kind of like it's a lot of improvisation and like a jazz musician again because playing the piano and having great piano teachers,
yeah,
I can make that correlation between that doing that at a piano and then doing it at a desk pushing
yeah,
pixels.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
There is none.
Yeah. It's so interchangeable now. Like I said, you can be working on your desktop and I want to go to the coffee shop and you can move it over to your laptop or notebook
Right,
or
right.
whatever. And I
But
definitely agree with you that I believe necessity is the mother of invention. You know, when
oh
you
yeah,
need something, that's when, hey, if I don't have it, I create it or I just make do with the tools that I have and make the best. And I think that's where ideas and your creations come out of, for sure. Allison,
yeah.
what are you kind of hoping that people take away from, the ride and what they feel after they view it?
Um, I know now with schools we're erasing Black history.
Hmm.
Um, I want them to see from a personal point of view, from a person's point of view, that this happened. This is happening often. This was not a one. This is part of our history,
Yeah.
and I just want people to see it, acknowledge it, um, and
Yeah. And
let's try to do better
and the
because
sad.
it, it's still happening in some
Yeah, that's what I was
ways.
just getting ready to say. The sad
We're
thing
not.
is, it's
If we
still
don't
going
teach our
on.
history, we can't learn from our history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, and that's the purpose of history. So during this, and it really bothers me during this time where somehow just it's okay to erase Black history
Yeah.
because of people up in arms about CRT. Um, Now we can't move forward. We
Yeah.
can't be better
Yeah.
because we don't know what we're being better about. We don't, there are kids that are not going to even learn that Black people were hung
Yeah. Yeah.
simply for being Black.
Yeah, yeah. And on
You
that
know,
note, we're going to take a quick look at the animatic that they put together for their Kickstarter campaign and give you kind of just an overview of what the ride is all about. So let's take a quick look at it here.
My uncle was a member of a family, the Jefferson family, and they were the only undertakers in not just Vicksburg, but in the neighboring communities. He would go through the countryside into the rural areas and collect whatever the arrangement was that the undertaker had with the family. And we would ride with him, not infrequently, when we went into the deepest part of the rural areas in the woods. We would find these remains of Black people hanging. And then so my uncle would try to find out, are you missing anyone from your family? And he would try to take these bodies down, send for a larger truck to get the bodies down and try in some way to find to whom they belong. After a while, it wasn't so much looking forward, because you wanted to go, but you didn't know what you would encounter, what you would see.
Like I said, a powerful, powerful piece. Um, Now, Allison, for you, you said immediately in your head you saw it as animation, and of course, Jay Bird, you know, you know, there's 2D, 3D. Was there a conscious thing like I think this would look better in 2D, or I think this would work in 3D? Um, did y'all have that conversation between the two of you of like I think this would be like I said powerful, and we're starting to see even a mix of the two, with the Spider Verse and just some of the other animations that are coming out. We're starting to see a blend of the two. But is there, Allison, like with you, a conscious? I think this, I see it as in 3D or I see it in 2D. And was that the same way with you, Jay Bird? I saw this in 2D and I see this in 3D.
Well, I think since the beginning, Jay Bird saw it as 2D and 3D. Am I correct, Jay Bird?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think at one time I was so frustrated. I was like, "We're not finding this money. Can we just do it all in 2D?" And he was like, "No." And then the director, you gotta know when to fall back in a relationship, and you gotta know when to trust your partner. So I was like, "Okay, we will get this done." The 2D
not that 2G is cheap either, but
I was like, "Oh no, the 3." I was like, and the 3D will be 3D. So, all right, Jay Bird,
take it away. Hey, yeah, that's when you. Okay, I digress to your skills.
I didn't remember that. I didn't remember that till just now.
Jay Bird has so much in 2D done. I'm like, well, can't you just finish it up in 2D? He was like, no. And I was like, okay.
Hey, if you're gonna meld the two, you got to be strategic on how it looks and how it's put together.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, yeah, well, I mean, because it all imparts meaning. To see the 2D part of it, the hybrid of the two,
Yeah.
and the fully 3D, and then returning to somewhat of a 1D, 2D aspect of it at the very end, because I think using the different approaches and different environments to animate in,
Yeah.
It kind of represented her, not fully dimensional, naive, childlike view of the world, and then reality stepping in and ruining that for that day. You know what I'm saying? Because, when you're a child, you learn how the world looks a certain way through books, pictures, prints, whatever. And her being a woman from Brooklyn in the 1930s scene, I'm sure some great work from the Harlem Renaissance, great print work, all that stuff from the late 1800s. I'm sorry, late 1900s, early, late 1800s, early 1900s. She probably saw all that stuff some way or another because it's so prevalent in New York.
Yeah.
Even in times where people you would imagine would have access to it, their parents made sure they had access to it. So, being the inquisitive, young girl that she was, I made that beautiful assumption that she's probably seen this kind of style of work before, especially when dealing with the history of African Americans at that time, because most of the stuff I saw were prints of people that were either depicted that way because they didn't have photographs, or it was the last photograph of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, seeing the world in a hand-drawn print kind of way, coming from my own hand, I said, okay, well, this can be the beginning, because this is how she's entering this part of the country. And that's probably how she learned about it, was through prints, seeing people picking cotton. My mom picked cotton in a small town in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Still talks about it. You know what I'm saying?
Man,
So
it's scary how close in time that it really is.
Right. Exactly. So, and I'm just like, so I was like, I want that to be kind of urban and Southern at the same time. It's an urban lens she's looking through, but she's seeing the South in the way that she's seeing it supposedly in books, prints, probably her own imagination too, from people telling her a little about it. Yeah. So when she moves, deeper into the story, and the story gets more realistic because of the horror she's starting to see, then it becomes more 3D, because that is the real world. Now, it's still somewhat surreal, and it has some little touches of magic realism in it too. And that's great, because at the time I was like, 3D was kind of like the only way to kind of like do some of that stuff, because I didn't have time to draw it. The other thing too is like, but again, it's like, I didn't want myself to be so prevalent in the story, like visually. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but I knew that Doris was going to hook it up as far as the 3D is concerned. I mean, she's amazing. She did some great character animation. I mean, the way she did the character designs and the animation is kind of like I saw it in my head. So I was like, but I was familiar with her work anyway, because we were working on my short, and she was on that. And so, when we got deeper into it and see what we could do with it, I said, okay, well, let's see what we can make specifically 2D, again, because it came down to cost. Because I didn't want to break Allison's bank on it because if it, and I wanted to make sure it got made.
Yeah.
So like, okay, this is going to be 2D, and then when we get here, we'll use 2D elements in all of the backgrounds. Again, harkening back to Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
who has some of the dopest backgrounds of all time. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, which look like modern art now if you look at it. You know,
Yeah.
those guys were so amazing at that. And just like making the clouds and the trees and the architecture characters, I was like, I want her to, because I'm sure that, because when I was a kid, that's the way I looked at these things. You know, like I remember there was a point in time when I moved out here to the house where I live now. You know, it's like, you know, there was a huge forest. We had like 12 acres or something like that, and it's like I was kind of like not afraid of the forest, but I was cautious of the forest because of stories of what I heard about Emmett Till.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And other, you know, people who are anonymous or people you see in books. So I was like, I know this is my land, but it ain't necessarily my land.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I wanted to impart that kind of like not fear, but caution. Because when you're a kid, you still have your own kind of like ways of like negotiating, you know, danger and risk,
Yeah.
you know. But and you do that usually with your siblings or with other kids that you meet. And so she told us that story about going there with her brothers and, you know, hanging out with these kids that were the children of her father's clients who he was collecting burial insurance from, which is just another way of saying, that's the cost of paying for, you know, to get buried when you die. At least that's what they were
Yeah.
referring to. And so we wanted to make sure that when we come into the story, you see her world the way it is in 2D, you see trees in 2D, and then you start seeing trees in 3D. And then you start seeing the trees become characters because they're storytellers too. And I wanted to impart this kind of like subtext that even the trees are tired of being complicitous in this horror.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, to me, the best way we could have done that was in 3D. Now, since then, you know, 20 pounds ago, you know, in so many years since we've started that, we have things like Unreal now and Blender,
Oh man.
where
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Well, I'm like, I can make a forest look exactly like the way I want it to.
Yeah.
And I got this great lead animator who's great at that. Where I can like, oh, bro, I can send him a sketch. It's like I need the houses 20 feet apart, you know, this far from the road.
Yeah.
And he's like, I got you. Okay. And you know, that sequence where you see where the one of the victims with the house on her head,
Yeah.
you know, to me, one of the things that is not discussed enough of that time period when lynching was used as a tool to break down family structures. That's what that scene in that shot means. It's like it is destruction of a home, not just a family, but a family structure, a home, and that kind of artificial kind of like interpretation of that to me is just like is gonna be one of the gut punches. It ain't the one reason why we put it in that preview. There's more to that. That's even, you know, that tells you even more. But see, the cool thing about this too is like about animation too, it really keeps you on the toes about how pressing it one should be about not trafficking in Black trauma, which is too much we see a lot of in media.
Yeah.
So we're going to tell this story, being respectful to Dr. Adelaide's, you know, point of view, the victims that she talks about, and also deal with people who silence is complicit in this stuff, and also the people who perpetrate it.
Yeah.
So we're going to, you know, kind of deal with them all here, and that's what I think makes this particular piece so, you know, different from other ones. And again, using the hybrid of the 2D and 3D to kind of more metaphorically get that across is going to be really, really powerful, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
For sure.
Yeah.
Miss Maggie thinks it was amazing. Appreciate that,
Thank you.
Maggie, for sure.
Thank you.
Like I said, it is amazing project. For you, Allison, obviously this was kind of your first foray into using animation. Do you see, you know, more of your projects, more of your stories being told in this format?
Yeah, this is actually the first part of anthology we're going to do. So we went back to the documentary. It's called In Our Lifetime, and we're choosing just really strong stories to animate to put together in the In Our Lifetime anthology. But we thought the ride was the strongest, so we wanted to start with the ride.
Yeah.
It was the first one I saw, and it was later on that we was like, okay, there's some more stories here. There are a lot more stories that we can, you know, animate and put together.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. You know,
Yeah.
we're just going to take one story at a time. But our goal is to we have about 6 or 7 that we want to put together
Aw-
and put them
Awesome,
all together.
awesome,
So
awesome.
I'm excited about
And
that.
also,
To add on to that too, Don, we knew
no,
if we
go
can get
ahead.
this one made, and just to add on to that too, we knew if we can get this one made, we can make anything after this
Yeah,
because this has been very challenging, you know,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
in raising funds and also emotionally, in the cathartic sense. It's
yeah,
just like, you know, so we know some of the other stories we want to do, and this one is kind of like the toughest. So we feel like if we can convince people to support us for this one. I mean, they're gonna really love what we do after this even
yeah,
more.
yeah.
We've got some great. We don't want to spoil them yet, because now that we've like decided to turn this into an anthology. I mean, that also opens up some other opportunities for us to be supported in ways that we couldn't just do in one short.
Yeah,
And so we love the fact that we rallied this a great Facebook fam and like our Kickstarter people who've like our patrons who like support us, man, we love y'all. I mean, this is really putting us in position to, create some other stories we know that they're going to be proud of that they were on the ground floor of doing this one,
yeah,
so.
yeah. Miss Maggie, this is still, like I said, in the works. Like I said, they just finished their Kickstarter to kick off, production for it and get it off the ground. So I'm, guessing, how much time. I don't want to label a time on it, but how because I know it's a long, especially when you're on a small team doing it yourself, type of thing. It goes a long way. But for you, what is kind of your projective date of when you're wanting to get this out?
I'll give my date, but my director will have a more accurate date. So I'll just start off with my date. I'm
Oh,
hoping end of 2022, beginning of 2023.
Gotcha.
And it's something like when I started this, I was like, oh, 7 minutes. How long is that going to take? 7 minutes in animation
Yeah.
is a lifetime.
That's
right,
almost depending. And like I said, if you're doing this by yourself, that's a couple of years right there.
right, right, exactly. Well, see, that's why when we were at the Jacob Burns Film Center, which they had this marvelous house with 2 computers, and we used to like treat it like we were in production already. Like when we got there, like, okay, what we're gonna do first, and we were like, okay, we had like this sheet, like 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. And we were like, okay, we're gonna do this, and we got like 99.9% of it done. That
Yeah,
we set out to do that, and that was like so great because again, we've been able to kind of like realistically put a schedule together based on us fine tuning the animatic and saying like, we can do this part right here for this amount, we can do this part right here for this amount, we can do this part, and it was great because again, we could really schedule and say like, yeah, we could probably have this done by the end of 2022, or the beginning of 2023. Because I like to start talking to people about it, like Black History Month, late January
yeah,
next year. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
Yes.
we can, get some additional support for the other stories that we have too. Uh, so yeah, and again, bro, we have an amazing team. I can't believe that I can't believe it because this story attracts people like that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
not only we have great animators, we've got a great composer too, who composed that music for that animatic, and you got to walk a fine line with animatics because sometimes people fall in love with the way animatics look.
yeah. And that's just the animatic because it's gonna.
It's perfect. And I'm like, excuse me, Mr. Carter, it's not finished yet. It's not going to look quite like that.
It's definitely it'll be the final will definitely look different than the
Right.
animatic will
Yeah.
for
So,
sure.
so you see that title card I made, I put in red letters, not reflective of the final render. You know what I mean? Now part of it will, like the hand drawn aspect of it, but the animation, you got to
Yeah,
keep it as
yeah. No,
rudimentary and low res as possible, so you can be able to proliferate it to people who can see it. And you got to
yeah,
kind of give them some leeway to have some imagination about it too. Like if you're an animator,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
kind of get an animator on, it's like, look, this is the part we want you to be responsible of, but we don't want you to be too locked in the way it looks because we want to bring your visual aesthetics to it as well.
yeah,
And that's something, as a director, I love, about directing is like, I don't have to, micromanage everything.
yeah, yeah,
You use this phrase, like total work earlier. And that's, one of the things that I got, onto when I was studying my architecture my freshman year was the concept of the Gesamtkunstwerk. The Gesamtkunstwerk is this German term that used total work or complete work. And it's, you know, it was, you know, utilized by some of my favorite architects at the turn of the century out of, you know, Vienna and Germany. And so, you know, what it means is like you're like putting your imprint on every aspect of the design or production of something. You know, now in the '60s, you know, the auteur theory kind of like developed in kind of similar mentality. You know, but they were kind of like, you know, a little looser with it. But the thing about doing animation is you can make things look exactly like you imagine, but you don't always have to. And that's why you like finding the right people. Again, similar sensibilities, great team members,
Yeah.
tenacity, great work ethic, all that, because it all matters, you
Yeah.
know. And so when you actually give people freedom, you
Yeah.
know, to do stuff instead of like, no, it's got to be like this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that don't work. You know what
And
I'm
that's
saying?
and I think that's the nature of animation, filming. You know, a writer can write something, but an
Right.
actor can bring something totally different to the words that they put down. And that's what I love about the whole creation process. It's a fluid process. You know, it's
Yeah.
not going to be, you know, frame for frame how you sketched it out and or as a writer wrote it down, because animator, an actor, is going to bring their own interpretation and flavor to it, and that's what you would want as a director, to have, you know, that person bring that what they see in their head and mesh the two together.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
I totally
true
feel you.
collaboration. It's
Yeah,
not.
it's a collaboratory. You know, the whole thing is collaboration, which is,
Yeah.
like I said, another thing of why I love animation. It's a collaborative process. You know, you got
Yeah.
creative people working together, bringing their different visions to one project, and it's gonna come. And the goal is to make the project the best that it could be. So everybody's gonna bring, you know, their own kind of flavor to it. Um, have
Yeah.
you thought further ahead as far as, okay, it's done, distribution, what you're thinking as far as where you're wanting to take it, where you're, you know, wanting it to, you know, Netflix self distributing? Have you thought a little further as far as that goes?
Yes, so there's, I guess, two ideas, like the film festival route, but we also wanted to play at Jay Bird, help me out, the museum in
Yeah.
Mississippi.
Right. Yeah.
That,
It's called the people refer to it as the lynching museum, but it's a
Mm,
memorial for people who were, you know, lost,
yeah,
through I think it's the slave trade and lynching. It's how can I put it? It's one of those kind of memorials. It's like it's so transcendent that it feels like that's where the story needs to kind of start. Or
yeah,
hopefully we can premiere it there. You know,
yeah,
that's kind of like the dream. But we'd also like to do a tour with it, like in some other institutions as well, uh, like for African American museums, regional museums, museums of cinema and design if we have to, because
yeah,
we want to share every aspect of the production of this and show people, especially young people who want to get in this, who like you and I, Don, were drawing speed racer cartoons in the margins of their textbooks. You know what
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Yes, and yes, speed crashes again. So, I mean, I'm telling you, man, moments like that really connect people to stuff that they want to do, even when
Yeah,
they don't even know what they want to do yet.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think being able to share like all the aspects of the behind the scenes, as they call it, because remember back then, we could only see the stuff in the pages of Starlog and Cinefantastique
yeah,
magazine.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the only place you can find that stuff. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And then it started to be known as like supplemental material on
Oh
DVDs.
yeah,
And
and I
now,
love
and now
watching, like I said, the behind the scenes and the making
right,
of. You know,
exactly. And that's when people get hooked hooked to the magic of cinema. It's like they see that stuff and you're like, oh, I can make that. And
yeah,
that was one of the cool things about being in the Black Public Media, incubator space for me, and then being in Sundance Collab, before that, it demystified a lot of stuff that people don't teach you
yeah,
in schools about this stuff.
yeah.
That you either have to learn on the job or you have to learn from a really generous, collaborator
Or a
or a mentor.
mentor. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
And
know what I'm
and
saying?
that's, like I said, the main reason why I do the show. It lets others see that it's possible, and that there are other creators that look like them that are out there doing the type of work that they aspire to do. Because you
Yeah,
wouldn't know it unless you see it. that type of thing. So I think it's definitely important to show, um, you know, not only the history but what's possible with when you let your imagination go and really trust that you can get it done. And even if it takes years to do it, just trust in your feeling of creating what it is that you want to create, for sure.
And
Yeah.
another part of the whole idea of doing the museums, and Jaber has come up with some great ideas of doing some AR, VR with it, some
Mm,
gallery pieces, just
yeah.
to, the
That
movies
would
like
be a
picture.
powerful thing. Yeah. A VR experience of that would be, yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
might be almost triply hard to take as like roots. If I
Well,
had to walk around the tree, see.
well, see, the thing is, see that's what I'm saying. We won't be like showcasing and highlighting the violent aspect of it. We want to put you in the places, put you on the paths where these people may have walked or been dragged to or whatever. But it's like it's again, it's not to traumatize people. This
Yeah.
is a context because again, because the people again who were silent and complicit in this stuff, they need to learn a lesson about this too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
So,
and
you
that's
know
the
what I mean?
beauty. Like I said, that's the beauty of it. It's a teaching tool, an educating
Right.
tool that can be really powerful, to really not only show others, but for others be a self introspective thing that they start to think about.
Yeah. And then once the anthology is done, I would love to be able to see it on like on a streaming service like Netflix, so everyone can see like
Yeah,
all the pieces together.
yeah,
Um,
Right. Exactly.
yeah. Now,
Yeah.
for you, Allison, you love, like I said, history, oral history, but are there other genres that you would like to dive into? Science fiction, that type of thing? Or,
no,
I mean,
more okay, not science fiction. That's not my thing, but more almost more like family.
okay.
I don't want to say family dramas. Family. There's another piece that we're working on called Eight. That I did it again. I wrote the script and sent it to Jay Bird. He came up with all these images. I was like, yes, I'm telling you, find your team and keep your team close. Um, so and
Yay.
that was a very personal piece to me. Um, and I hope that will. I almost want to take a break after we get the ride done from the anthology to get that done. And I think that's going to be, and we're going to have to come back and talk to you about that once we're
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah.
And Miss
Yeah.
Maggie said she can't wait for that one, for sure.
okay.
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was gonna be dope. Seriously, I mean, you were talking about like Spider Man and like that kind of. I mean, this is like one of those kind of films that could be as popular as that. I mean, because of the theme
yeah,
and like the connection to the main character. Because again, it's another great story about from a young from from the perspective of children.
yeah.
That's about something that's really serious. But I'll let Allison wait for the time to reveal that.
that's
That's
coming
gonna
up
be
next. I think that's going to be next. Hopefully,
Yeah,
we can get that
yeah,
to break
yeah.
next
right,
Are
year.
are
right.
both of you encouraged about the type of stories, content that's coming out now that you're starting to see? I think now diversity and inclusion is kind of a buzzword in a sense, and we're starting to see a lot more diverse characters, diverse stories, and things like that. Are both of you kind of encouraged, or what are your thoughts on just the type of stuff now that's starting to come out and the type of creators that are starting to grab a hold of their own stories and content and really put it out there?
Yeah, I'm encouraged. There's so much content out there now because there's no so many platforms to show it on. I want to just give a shout out to Netflix and what they're doing with African cinema.
Yeah,
I mean, like that has been amazing,
yeah,
and it's good work coming out of
yeah,
South Africa, Nigeria, and I'm watching
Yep.
these movies like this. Like I want to say, for this summer, most of the stuff I've been watching is from South Africa
oh
and
yeah,
Nigeria.
and I say it a lot. I've had quite a few African guests on the show and
Yep.
made a lot of great African friends. Actually, a few weeks ago, mother and daughter, Dr. T and her daughter,
Hmm.
Cabello, with Cablo Studios over in Africa, are doing some great animation work educating people on health and medicine. But just the content, like you said, the breadth of content now that's starting to come out from, it's always been there, but now starting to come out from Africa is just been mind blowing to me, and I've had such a great time and honor connecting with so many talented African creators.
Yeah, and it's just like when we were coming up with, we had 3 channels on the television. Okay, cable came around.
Yeah,
You know,
and that was
maybe how
dependent on
many
if
movies,
your rabbit ears picked it up.
like how many movies came out a year? Like
Yep.
it wasn't that a lot, but now, I mean, sometimes there's, well, you have a lot of context.
It's too
Sometimes
much
there's
almost now.
a lot of junk, but there's a lot of good stuff coming out, and
Yeah,
a lot. And I'm just happy to be a part of that. I'm
yeah,
just so happy that there's so many people out there telling their stories, which is our stories.
yeah,
Because at one time, when content was coming out about us, it wasn't coming from us.
yeah. And it's funny because I've had this conversation not only with uh, us as blacks, but Asians. They're going through the same thing. Native Americans,
Yep.
Latinos. They're all going through the. We're all going through the same thing as far as we haven't been represented in true fashion, and now, like I said, it's time that we tell our stories in a way that's more authentic to how we really are as people. You know.
Yes, and not through the white gaze.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Jay Bird? I mean, have you? I mean, what are your thoughts as far as just the content and things that you've seen starting to come out?
Yeah, I am definitely enthused, intrigued, uplifted by a lot of the work that well, for the let's put it this way, for the widening and more open mindedness about how can I put it, content from people of color,
Yeah,
of all people really,
yeah.
that have been subjected to, like, being
The
on the
bottom
fringes,
rung.
or being pushed to the periphery. But the thing is this too, it's just like, my thing is, it's like, I hope these streamers really see that this can be a long term thing. The networks can see this as a long term thing. The studios, I'm not so sure about that yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's
so
it's
because
kind of
because again,
iffy. Yeah, for me, it's kind of iffy. Like I said, they
It's
still
important
have a
because a lot of
long way to
countries no
go.
longer on TV.
Yeah,
would you say, Allison? Would you say
I
Allison?
said it's like the control of the studios. It bothers me. Like Love Country is not on television anymore. That was an
Right.
amazing show, and how it just got
Yeah.
shut down.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
of course, for them, bottom line is kind of always dollars. They're always kind of thinking dollars. And I always say, like I said, some companies are, doing better than others with the content that they put out.
Right.
But all of them still have a long way to go. I
Right.
Yeah.
agree with you, Allison. I always say Netflix is, doing a pretty good job of really putting different content than what's normally been out there. And
Yeah.
I attribute it to the fact that, they're totally, younger. They haven't been around like Disney or Warner for decades and decades and decades, 50,
Right.
60 years. So, it's going to be a little harder for those companies now to start. They're starting to gradually, like I said, Disney is partnering with companies over in Africa now to put out content. So they're starting to make that kind of switch.
Yeah. I never thought that I would. Well, I mean, I'm gonna say I never thought. I knew it was gonna take some time. Because I seem to, always arrive too early and overdressed for these things. But the thing is, it's like, for the longest time, I didn't think that I would ever see a series on TV that featured Native Americans, Cherokees, Sioux, whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
because Cherokees in my mother's lineage. I was trying to tell a story like that myself again
yeah,
in the '80s, late '80s. I think I started working on it.
yeah,
Then Lone Star came out, and I was like, maybe this might help.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Because if you're like doing a certain kind of work, and sometimes it's avant-garde for just showing up
yeah,
to people, that you need a reference point, precedent. And so, things like, what Pete did with this Spider-Man film, which was
yeah,
banana.
yeah.
You know, the short that won like the Academy Award, or at least was nominated for one, about the good hair.
Oh, Hair Love? Yeah,
Hair
yeah.
Love,
And
that's it,
actually
yeah.
had the co-director of Hair Love, Robert Downey Jr. Shout out to Robert Downey. He's doing amazing work with Netflix as well. His
Right.
animated film, My Dad the Bounty Hunter, should be coming
Right.
out pretty soon. Does some amazing stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but
I mean,
I think that speaks though a lot to what we talked about earlier as now being such a great time for content creators. They can bypass and get their own content out
there
without
you go.
Yes.
necessarily having to go to Disney or and build their own audience and following to
Right.
where those studios will eventually start come knocking on your door if they see that your work is really resonating and building an audience.
And
So
that's how it happened.
it's a great time. I love this time
Yep.
for content creators because now they're seeing the power that they truly hold in their own hands of
Mm.
getting whatever it is, whether it's a short film, an animated short, content, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. You got all these channels that allow you to control your own content that you put out.
Yeah. Well, you brought up science fiction. I was like, man, finally, like these scripts that over here like collecting dust.
Oh
I got
yeah,
like these sci-fi stories. I'm like, oh my god, I'm so glad Lovecraft Country showed up, or these other films that featured Mexicans, Indians in science fiction context, which you would never think that was going to happen up until the 90s.
yeah,
When it started popping up.
yeah,
Places like Spain, Mexico, or like something like District 9. That was
yeah,
dealing with
yeah.
social
Apart,
stuff in a
yeah,
way that like Silent Running did back in the day. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? You go in an office like, yeah, have you ever seen Silent Running? Y'all, you Silent Running your butt out of here. No, I ain't never heard of that.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
No, I mean it's like so much you had to deal with, with the reference point or lack thereof
Yeah,
that
yeah,
has changed so much
and it's
once again.
such an interesting take the way,
Right.
and I think and the late great Nichelle Nichols, who just passed, I think
Oh,
Gene Roddenberry was a master at that in
yeah.
putting social context and wrapping it in something that was palatable that people could get a hold of, which was science fiction.
Yep. Yep. I think like, 'cause see, seeing like Star Trek, Silent Running, The World of Flesh and the Devil, which is another great film. Up to a certain extent, Soylent Green, because what else were you going to watch on a Saturday afternoon when it was raining outside? You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? That and George Lucas's THX 1138, which has this great performance by Don Pedro Colley, who was in one of
Yeah,
those Planet of the Apes films,
yeah,
who's playing a hologram in a white world, a
yeah,
completely white world. I mean, dude. I mean, if that doesn't have Ellisonian overtones to it, I don't know what does. But I mean,
yeah,
when I see it, I'm just like, damn, it's, again, but you have to be at a certain mindset in a particular time, usually after midnight and up at 2 o'clock in the morning, to see these stories and have them capture you in places like that touch you emotionally. So, but yeah, so now like sci-fi, horror, you know,
yeah,
that kind of like magic realism with people of color in it, black people, indigenous people,
yeah,
black and indigenous people,
yeah,
which in the
yeah,
case of my script, you know, at least there's a lot more interest now
yeah,
as
yeah.
opposed to none
Yeah,
10,
and I
15,
think,
20 years
like I
ago.
said, you got these great young creators. Jordan Peele's new one. Nope, I hadn't gone to see it yet, but um, just wrapping it up in what his passion is. Part of what his passion is horror. You didn't think that it's for, you didn't, you wouldn't have thought that. Like I said, I thought, we were the first ones to get killed off, or we wouldn't be going
Right.
in there in the first place. So,
Yeah.
that type
Yeah.
of thing. I think
Yeah.
it widens this perspective of what um, diverse culture life really is like. What like I said, it's not just this myopic thing of what this
Right.
one group thinks we are. Thugs
Right.
or hoes or pimps or whatever it is. There's
Yeah.
this big broad canvas and palette of what every race brings to their own space. That's what I
Right.
love about it. And like I said, you
Right.
got these young creators that are just um, creating some awesome things, and it gives you a more appreciation of the ones who are really masterful at it, you know, like Gene Roddenberry, and just ahead of their time in the content and the stories that they were
Yeah.
putting out,
Well,
and
well,
really were
Don,
open to
even
it.
even before Gene, and you can see this through the work of Jordan Peele, the work of Rod Serling and Buck Houghton in
Oh
Twilight
yeah,
Zone.
and I was thinking about that
No,
while you were talking about it. I
woo,
love the Twilight Zone.
dude, man, I'm gonna tell you, one of my great patrons and friends and supporters, Dr. Anche Anderson, who brought me to Hastings College in 2011 or 12 to do a couple of my first artist in residencies, 2 years back to back. And and I said to myself, I said, self, I said we can make a career or a side gig out of going around and talking about your art and getting paid for it. I mean, I loved it. But the thing is, in all seriousness, though, it's like when you're talking to students at a college or in any context, high school, whatever, and kids ask you questions, they deserve honest answers. And
Yeah,
so I was using a lot of the stuff that I grew up on, like Twilight Zone, Playhouse 90, which was
yeah,
on NBC, you
Mm.
know, Omnibus, which was another show that used to come on ABC. They used to have all these great showcases. I think that's where I saw one of my first music videos and didn't even know that's what it was.
yeah.
Um, but the thing was, I showed them like a couple of, or talked about some episodes of The Twilight Zone. He Lives, which is
Hmm.
about neo-Nazism.
Yeah,
Like that never went away.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? The Aliens Are Due on Elm Street.
yeah,
That's another great
yeah,
one.
yeah,
I Am the Night, Color Me Black. I
yeah,
mean, come on.
yeah. Like I said,
So it's
so
like,
many. Rod had just so many of them.
right. And see, man, and Rod pulled no punches.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
loved about his work. And see,
yeah,
again, that's one of those things that, we were fortunate enough to be able to through the Jacob Burns Foundation, was Jacob Burns Film Center, was to go to the Denzel Washington School to talk to the kids about the ride. And we talked and talked and talked, and those kids were just like, they were so receptive. They asked us great questions. I loved it. It was like one of the things that it took me back to my, arts and residency at
yeah,
Hastings. I was like, I said, I gotta do some more of these. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah,
But COVID and stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
anyway,
yeah. And I think
but
that's what it boils down to: really exposing, you know, the younger ones to what is out there and what they can do. I think that's the
exactly.
big thing, and that's why I always encourage a lot of artists, talent, that I would hope they would take, their passion and go to these schools to really, because I know what it would have done for me had I
Yeah.
seen somebody come into my school and really be passionate and really doing it.
Right. Well, we had a great time there, man. But the important thing too is, like you were talking about, like tools and influence and access. And the Denzel Washington School at this high school, that's what's the town? Tell me what town it was again. Allison, was it? It was
Was it Newark? Were we in?
no,
No,
it
no,
wasn't
no.
New York. We were in New York.
New York. I
Mount
don't
Vernon.
remember.
Mount Vernon.
Yes, thank you.
Again, 55. Anyway, so we were in Mount Vernon at this wonderful school, and one of the Arno, one of the directors of our program, went with us, and we talked to these kids, talked to the staff, and ironically, when we stepped into one of the art studios of one of the art teachers who brought kids to our presentation, she had a photograph of "Lift Every Voice and Sing," a sculpture by Augusta Savage.
Hmm.
And I saw it, and I got to show you something. I got to show you something. So I opened up our style sheets in our lookbook, and that same photograph is in there. And I was like, this photograph, this sculpture, and the sculpture itself informed the design sensibility of a particular period, which was 1933. The story takes place.
Yeah,
And just that kind of, we need individuals like that in schools to be able to tell kids, like, this is important and
yeah,
why.
yeah,
Because again, a lot of people deal with people's greatness, but they don't put that greatness in context. And it's the same thing with like the intimacies of stories like this, which I refer to as, products of the intimacies of global conflict. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so you kind of like have to deal with that in a very, specific and special way where kids get it without it dimming their incandescence to grow into functioning adults.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So now that the kids have the tools to express themselves, which I didn't. I couldn't afford a video camera when I was a kid. My
Yeah,
parents.
technology now
uh,
will give
You know what I'm
them
saying?
opportunities.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
thought we had money because because my parents would teach them. I'm like, no.
Yeah. Nah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Man,
Like I said,
no money, no real money.
yeah, the tools that are available now are just
Yes.
way beyond, you know, as you can tell, what I started with, pencil and
Right,
paper, but uh,
right.
you know,
Yeah,
it is. But and see, in the front, and what I'm thankful for me, like I said, you know, I'm 56, getting ready to turn 57. So
yeah.
I'm come from that age of before cell phones and mailboxes on the corners and
Right,
all that type of stuff. But I'm also not caught in that mode of not moving forward. And
right,
I love technology and where technology has brought us and has given us the capability of doing. So
right.
that's why I love, like I said, I'm a student of learning and really enjoying all this software, hardware, this space that we're in that allows me to even more easily get my ideas out there. Heck, I wouldn't be able to do this live show,
Right,
back
right,
in the day. So,
right. Yeah,
well,
yeah,
I could talk to you in New York, you in Tennessee, and have this great conversation and put on this great show because of the technology and the advancements and what it does and allows creatives to do.
yeah. I agree, and it's great. I always felt like and this again is something that kind of reinforced when I started studying architecture. I always felt like that, technology was could be another aspect of emancipation. If it was used properly.
Yeah,
Especially coming from cultures that were once used as technology.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
So, what I mean? It's like, so, again, these stories we can tell now, where they be in the science fiction genre, magic realism, neo-realism, which is another big fan. I was, watching all these Rossellini films growing up and all this stuff coming out of Italy from the 40s and 50s. I mean, telling those stories and not flinching, man.
yeah,
You gotta, again, give the people what they want, but also give them something they didn't know they needed.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Very, very important point. Again, everybody that's just jumping in, tuning in, we've been having an amazing conversation. Mr. Michael, I appreciate that. Yeah, this has been amazing. And like I told you yesterday on our call, this time goes by quick. We're already quarter into 2 hours, going close
what?
into 2 hours. An hour and 44 minutes we're at right now. So
Uh,
these these are the type of shows and conversations I love so much. Like I said, for me, it's it's just cherry on top of the cake. Meeting creatives. That's part of what it is. Other part is really exposing people to the great diverse talent that's out there that is creating amazing stuff.
yeah.
Um, Again, this show has really kind of rolled on for sure. I will kind of throw it in because I promised you guys. Well, I didn't promise, but I told you I tend to kind of keep it at an hour. But hey, it usually goes over because it
Oh,
goes by. You get into these conversations and you're
right.
just not looking at the time. So
Yeah,
I
no, I
have
hear you.
immensely enjoyed, and plus it gives me the opportunity I know to bring you guys back on as this project comes to fruition and your future projects come to fruition. I'm so
Thank you.
blessed and grateful for making the connection with you and building this friendship for sure. And like I told you before, anyway, that the color of motion is able and I am able to help and support what you're doing. We are there for sure. So I want to go on record as saying thank you so much for being a part of the Color of Motion family and making this another amazing episode for sure. Everybody, again, make sure that you come back, check out this episode because we talked about a lot of great stuff for sure. Also, make sure that you connect with Jaybird and Allison on their channels. You can, ooh, this should be over here. let me put this over here. You can find them on Twitter. They're also on Instagram. Check out the full animatic on Vimeo. It's almost 7 minutes long. Connect with them on Facebook. More importantly, support them on GoFundMe to help bring this project to fruition and completion for sure. But again, all this stuff and all this information is going to be on the show notes on the YouTube channel. So make sure that you hop on over there, check out the episode again, get all the information, and show some love and support for the ride, because it's going to be a great ride for sure. Again, Allison, Jaybird, can't thank you enough for making this such a great episode for me.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Like,
guy.
I
And
enjoyed ourselves.
what'd you say,
I
Allison?
hope you do.
Okay.
We aim to make it a blast experience
Yes.
for our friends and guests that come on the show for sure. And our goal, my goal, is to definitely make you the stars that you are and highlight the things that you are doing for sure. So I hope I lived up to that, and I hope the show has for sure. Um, if you could hang out in the green room for a second while I close out the show, I would much appreciate it. But everybody, please help me thank again my friends and guests, Miss Allison Shillingford and J. Bird Lathon.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Okay,
All right. As Mr. Matthew McConaughey says, all right. This has been a great episode. I had such fun. And I hope you, not only as a viewer, had fun, but as a viewer, learned some things and really are going to walk away with a new perspective on things as well. I want to thank again, my guests and friends, Allison and Jaybird, for coming on, being a part of the Color of Motion family. You, the viewers, for making it, as always, a great experience. I so enjoy bringing this show to you each and every week. Can't say it enough. Make sure that you join me next week, because we're going to have even more fun with my next special guest and friend, Miss Monique Henry Hudson, production supervisor and podcast host of Simply Robotics. We're going to have some fun, sit down, and have a great conversation with her. So make sure you join me next week with my guest and friend, Miss Monique Henry Hudson. Well, this brings to a close another great episode. I hope you have fun. Miss Maggie, I appreciate that. How do you get a super chat? I'm working on that. I'm going to add that. Hey, like I said earlier, if you would love to support the show and channel, hey, I love a great cup of coffee. Hop on over to buymeacoffee.com/Don Terrell, and you can support the show and the channel in any way that you choose. And I do so appreciate people that help out me to continue to level up the show and bring great guests such as Jaybird and Allison and all the guests that I've had on, and just continue to make great content on the channel. So again, buy me a coffee. I love coffee. Buymeacoffee.com/Don Terrell. Maggie, and you can support the show. I appreciate that for sure. Again, it's been a blast, people. And we are winding this down. Like I said, we hit the 2 hour, close to the 2 hour mark. So it's been a great one for sure. And it goes by quickly. You just have no idea. But I appreciate everybody that's jumped in, stopped by, stuck with us through the whole time as well. So, with that, hey, I'm going to call this one a wrap and put it in the can. Make sure that you join me next week, and I will see you same bat time, same bat channel. Cheers, everyone. Have a great week.